Hello and welcome to the Petticoated Swashbuckler. My name is Maren and today we are going to get this lovely lady a gown, but not any type of gown, a short gown. Despite how it might sound like, we're not going to give her a miniskirt. Well, I mean, technically, but she's going to be wearing stuff underneath it. For my last video, I made this dress. This is my 1920 comes early 1930s kind of redesigned dress. I had a lot of fun with it. I've taken a Regency pattern. I have adapted it so that the front has become the back and the back has become the front. I have added like a massive waistband and you know, that was probably like some decoration on the hem that's just been turned into a waistband. And I'm really happy with it. It's so cute and so comfy. I'm considering when I'm done wearing it for the lap to just like chop off some like centimeters of off the hem of it and just like wear it as a summer dress because it's super comfy. However, we're not done yet. I'm making clothing for an early 1830s Norwegian lady's maid, or chambermaid. And I have a lot of stuff already, as I showed you in a previous video. I now have this dress, which is meant to be a sort of hand-me-down from her employers, but I thought it would be nice for her to have something that's been made for her. Probably also, you know, by her, because she would have been able to sew. Like, that's one of the big chores of a chambermaid or a lady's maid, is to be able to sew, to fix clothing. A lot of fancy women's clothing had bits and pieces that were basted on and taken off and exchanged, and the person who does that is the chambermaid. So she would know how to sew. And this fabric it's not like the most fancy fabric, but it's got a nice block print on it. It's definitely, you know, it's nice. So I went looking for a fabric that's a little less fancy that she could have afforded, and I came across this. And I'm so happy with it. It's so beautiful. It's got this gorgeous, it's blue, but it's got some pale blue stripes with some green in the middle. It's just really, really pretty. And it has that sort of, it's not so easy to see, but can you see that it has that almost homespun quality to it? I'm very excited. I'm going to use this to make what's sometimes called a bedgown or a short gown. I consider them more of an 18th century thing. However, looking into it, they do appear throughout the 1830s as well, and especially on servants, and also in an American context on slaves. It's considered a very kind of utilitarian thing. Like, this is not something that you wear to be fancy, this is something you wear to work in. So I thought it would be fun, since this one is very obviously an old style that's kind of been refashioned slightly, that she hasn't got, you know, the big sleeves of the 1830s. You know, these sleeves are quite kind of demure and careful. I think it'd be fun to make big honking, like not as big as the ladies would wear obviously, but much bigger than those, sleeves on this bedgown or short gown. Now, a short gown or a bedgown is basically a dress that is not full length. They are very often, especially earlier in the period, in the 18th century and early 19th century, they're like a T-shaped tunic kind of thing, with the sleeve and the body cut in one piece and just cinched in at the waist with some drawstring. But for 1830s, they seem to be more common that you get satin sleeves, because you want that big fashionable poof sleeve, you know, that big old leg of mutton shaped sleeve. So I think You know, I think that'd be fun to make. I was wondering whether we had any tradition for that in Norway, since the slap is set in Norway. But then I came across a couple of national costumes, what we call bunad in Norway, especially from Røros, which is a beautiful town. If you haven't been to Røros and you're planning on visiting Norway anytime soon, I would highly recommend it. It is gorgeous. It's an old mining community, and without going into like the history of Røros in like lots of detail, and you know, we don't really have the time for that. It's a very interesting community where you have impulses from like Europe coming in, even though this is far from the capital, is very far from like the central areas in the kind of southern east part of the country, because of the mining activities. Impulses kind of travel up possibly faster than to other kind of districts far away from the central areas. So one of the bunad, the costume, national costume of Røros, has for married women a sort of jacket thing with big thumping in 1930s sleeves. It's gorgeous, and it is based very kind of strongly on the actual kind of custom, the actual clothing people wore from like the mid 1800s in Røros. And there's loads of images of old women wearing these really beautiful kind of 1830s, 1840s sleeves. So I thought it'd be, you know, that'd be nice. It'd be a fun thing to do. Now, a lot of the bedgowns I found internationally. I found some from the Netherlands. I found a few in like American and British sources. All of them seem to have not all of them. A lot of them seem to have the kind of drawstring gathered waist. However, some of the Dutch ones, as well as the Røros one from Norway, has fitted bodices. So it looks very much like a dress. It just has that kind of, it has the sleeves and it stops at like mid-thigh. So I thought it'd be fun to make one. I do not have a pattern, but I do have, hang on a minute, I do have this. I've used it before. Any of you might remember my teacup English dress from a few years back. Basically my 18th century pattern, like block for my body, has been developed using this one, and then I kind of slightly change it every time I make something new because I'm never 100% happy. And this has, the most beautiful thing about this book is that it starts off with your regular normal pattern block, and then it gives you instructions on how to adapt those pattern blocks into historical garments, historical shapes. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to use, because I do also have a pattern block that I had made it's a year ago approximately, that I used for some of my 1920s stuff. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to use that pattern block. I'm going to make a bodice shape, a bodice pattern. I'm going to like lengthen it from the waist down. The Røros one has a kind of a flat skirt on the front and then loads and loads of gathers at the back. So I might try and do something similar to that. I am a little bit tempted to do cartridge pleating because striped fabric is really kind of, it really lends itself to cartridge pleating, but we'll see what I have time for. So I'm going to make that pattern. I also found a pattern for big ass sleeve. I'm not sure you can see that because it's very light out. I want to make the front. I want to take some inspiration from the the Röros one, and I'm going to make the skirts quite flat in the front and then more sort of ruffled and with more width in the back. And I'm going to make big ass leg button sleeve. In this book they call it a gigot sleeve, which sounds much more fancy, but it's a big old leg button. And I'm gonna make it using this beautiful blue fabric. Want to come along? So the first thing I did was I drafted my pattern. I did have a pattern block to begin with. The book also gives you instructions on how to make that from scratch. I won't go into the details of how I did this in this video, but maybe in another one. The next thing I did was I made a mock-up. I put it on and adjusted it. One of the things I found out was that it's too narrow across the elbows and the underarms, so I'm just marking that out on the mock-up. I also marked where my waistline needs to go. Then I cut the fabric and the lining from my mock-up. I stitched the lining together. I stitched the darts in both the fabric and the lining. And I stitched the shoulder seams of my fabric, and I was so happy with this seam placement. I was really happy that I got to get all the stripes to match up so well. Then I basted the back piece to the lining. I then placed the side back piece over the side back of the lining and pinned those backside seams, folding the seam allowances under so that it's covering all the raw edges. I then basted the side seams and the armscye. And then went in and prick stitched the side back seam through all layers. Then I basted the front to the lining, folding all the seam allowances in, also along the side seam, as well as along the front opening and neckline. I then went in and prick stitched along all edges. Then I pinned my waistband to the bodice and stitched that in place. I pressed all the seam allowances down into the waistband. Then came the time to make the skirt, and the skirt is very simple, it's just a long rectangle. I pressed the seams. and I hemmed it along the lower end and the front opening. Then I pinned the skirts to the waistbands as well. I tried to gather up the back and then pleat the sides and leave the front fairly flat. I then lined the waistband. Hand stitching that in place, and this is also when I put in the hooks and eyes. Then this is almost finished. The only thing missing now are the sleeves. So I went on to make those. I stitched together the sleeves and the sleeve linings, clipping corners and pressing. And then I stitched the linings to the fabric at the cuffs. Then I gathered the massive sleeve head to fit into the arm side. And then I covered my raw edges, my seam allowance around the arm side with bias tape. And then it was time to try it all on. This is not the garment I've made that I've been the most happy with. There are some things I would have liked to change. I don't think it fits perfectly, but for something a servant girl has made for herself out of cheap fabric in any kind of 5-minute break she's had, it's not too bad.